What's up, guys? If you're not subscribed, please subscribe. Also, please smash that like button on the video and enjoy the show.
I heard this story. I'm trying to remember who told me this, but I think it was one of the conversations I had with the officials in Jordan about a doctor in Gaza who saw his entire family wiped out, except for one girl.
Yes, I know this. Alessi, can you pull this up? Piers Morgan, Palestinian doctor family.
Yeah.
I'm going to pull this guy up. This guy's amazing.
Yeah.
And he advocates for peace.
Yeah.
He's delivered. He worked in an Israeli hospital and delivered Israeli babies. That's his job.
Yeah. And yet you worry that there's so much hatred being generated in this, right now that, let's maybe listen to a little bit of this.
Yeah, I don't know if we can because it's Piers' stuff, but what's this guy's name? What Nobel Peace Prize?
So
Izzadine.
Yeah.
I remembered how to say this. Now I'm going to fuck it up. Izzadine Abuelaish.
That sounds right.
Yes, that was him.
Yeah. So
have you ever heard that tape of him talking to the Israeli media while his family's being found dead?
No, I haven't heard that. But
actually, we can play this. Alessi, type in Izzadine Abuelaish into YouTube.
Yep.
Calls Israeli media daughters. I want people to hear this because this is great. This was years ago now. This is, I want to say 2009. Go down. All right, Gaza, second one. Al Jazeera got Gaza doctors family caught on camera. So he was, pause this for 1 second, Alessi. He was friends with, this is an Israeli news station. He was friends with the anchor on TV.
Wow.
And what happened was his building was hit with a rocket. Now, he's not a threat. It was a mistake. They thought there was a threat there. They hit his building with a rocket and they killed, he has like 8 kids. They killed like 3 of his daughters. They killed nieces, whatever. And he was calling in as he was finding the bodies. Go ahead and play it, Alessi. Is the volume on?
Call to a doctor in Gaza who's been reporting daily for an Israeli station. His 3 daughters have just been killed. They've killed his family, he says. I think I'm a bit overwhelmed too. He then explains that Dr. Abuelaish is a Palestinian physician who's worked for years at an Israeli hospital. Who was hurt, he asks.
My God, my girl, Shlomi, can't anybody help us, please?
He has 8 children, the journalist explains. Maybe we can do something to help. Abuelaish, where's your house? The cameras then follow the journalist as he tries to use his contacts to send ambulances to help the survivors. Incredibly, he succeeds. The Israeli army allows a Palestinian ambulance to go straight to the Eretz border crossing. From there, the injured are transferred onto Israeli ambulances and taken to Israeli hospitals.
That's him.
Among them, one of the daughters who survived. For the most part of this 22-day war, Israeli journalists were not allowed to report from inside Gaza. And Dr. Abuelaish, a Hebrew speaker, was one of the rare voices bringing the reality of the Palestinian suffering into the Israeli living rooms.
Everybody in Israel knows that I was talking on television and on the radio, that we are at home, that we are innocent people. Suddenly today, when there was hope for ceasefire, on the last day I was talking to my children, suddenly they bombed us. Is that how you treat a doctor who takes care of Israeli patients? Is that what's done? Is this peace?
All right, that's good, Alessi. Now, remarkably, this guy has such a... I'm so glad you brought him up. He has such an amazing outlook that he's like a peacemaker.
Yeah.
But who would have been able to blame him if he became like a Hamas supporter? Because this is a guy delivering Israeli babies in their hospitals every day.
Yeah.
And that's what they do to him. It's just, I know it's complicated, but sometimes it feels careless.
Yeah, and the character in my first book, The Triple Agent, Sabalawi, was a doctor as well. Yeah. Worked as in a Palestinian clinic for pediatrics, and but was radicalized by fighting in Gaza in 2008, and so ends up becoming, eventually a volunteer for Al Qaeda. And this is someone who's educated. He speaks English. He's Western in many ways, but it is possible and pretty predictable that if people are exposed to trauma like that, they look for ways to strike back, and sometimes it's it's in lethal ways, and that's what happened in the case of the triple agent.
Absolutely. How do you? I mean, you said right at the outset of this part of the conversation, you're like, well, Hamas at some point it might be going away. Do you see this ending as not until Israel has wiped Hamas off the earth?
They're going to have to be satisfied that Hamas can't have political control, at least in the near future. And I don't know exactly how they manage that, because they don't want to own Gaza. That's just a horrible outcome for them. The best that I think people can hope for is that that the Arabs collectively, the Gulf states with their money, the Palestinians, the Jordanians, West Bankers, and others, can come up with a formula for some kind of governance that excludes Hamas, and they're going to have to be very careful about how they do that. But there can't be a Hamas, any kind of real Hamas authority left in Gaza for there to be any kind of peaceful outcome. Because I think until that group is really driven out or driven underground, as sometimes is the case, the Israelis aren't going to give up, because they want to see them absolutely crushed. And it's interesting. I think most people in the region who are kind of favor a two-state solution all kind of recognize that two-state solution is not possible with Hamas in control of any part of Palestinian territory. So it's the most complicated, difficult operation that you can imagine, but that's the only way that you can begin to have a sense of some kind of normalcy, is if there's another governing authority in that area that doesn't have the same kind of radical aspirations that Hamas does, but yet has legitimacy with people, and that's a lot of needles to thread.
Sure. Have you spoken with Israelis over there?
Oh,
like you had said, you spoke with a lot of IDF guys and some military and intel related guys, but have you spoken with civilians as well? And did they have peace on their mind from what you gather, or what do you think?
Yeah. So my conversations range from the sort of the sources that we deal with, and a lot of these are either government, military, or intelligence, but also with ordinary people too, and including Israeli colleagues. We've got people who are reporters for the Washington Post who happen to be Israeli citizens and live in the country and have experienced the crisis pretty much as any other normal person would over there. And you can't understate the trauma that October 7 was, because it seemed like everybody in Israel knew somebody who was affected personally, knew somebody who was killed, or knew somebody who was in the kibbutz that was attacked. And so they're all quite shaken by this. It's also hard to get any of them to think about a Palestinian state as being something that would be good for the region, because like we gave Gaza independence and look what it did.
Look what happened.
Yeah, it's just, as soon as you set it up, they're going to come after us. And you can understand that view. On the other hand, if there isn't some compromise, there isn't some way to give Palestinians a path to a state and some hopeful future, this is just an endless conflict.
It's endless.
And I feel like this is not universal, but among some Israeli government officials that I've spoken to over the years, they accept the fact that these are unsolvable problems, and that the best that anyone can hope for is to get through the next few years. I mean, they view Iran this way. I mean, the trajectory of Iran right now is pretty frightening, and it is an existential threat for the Israelis, and they recognize that. But if they can figure out a way to kind of have peace in our time, I mean, that's why I think people make deals with Hamas and do kind of hypocritical and underhanded things to kind of support bad people, because they see it as a way to have peace right now. And I guess you can't blame them for that, but it's not a way to get a permanent solution to the problem.
Yeah, it's tough because you have political factions too. Obviously, like, Israelis are all about Israel. They have a good national pride there, but you look at back when Rabin made the deal with Arafat, with the PLO, and what was that, the Oslo Accords in '93?
Yeah.
right? He was then viewed, some supported that, others viewed him as a traitor. He ended up getting whacked by some crazy guy who disagreed with it, who assassinated him. And, you know, it brought in, then Netanyahu won the election, and it kind of pendulum shifted the other way. Like, we will never negotiate with a terrorist like Arafat. And sure, you can make some arguments that Arafat had certainly okayed some things that certainly were terrorists, but it's like, you know, if you're going to have peace, you're never going to get 100% or even close to what you want.
Yeah, it has to be compromise.
And maybe you got to deal, I know people hate this line, but you got to deal with the devil you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And it turned out to Arafat was among the most reasonable among the ones the Israelis were dealing with at the time.
Which is wild to say. But
Yeah, but he actually, there was a point where he came around and was willing to recognize Israel's right to exist and to want to negotiate some kind of solution with them. And it didn't work out, and he was intransigent in his own ways, and kind of things fell apart. But I think he genuinely aspired to have a peaceful relationship with Israel.
Have you, throughout all your work, because obviously you have a lot of intel contacts and stuff like that, have you ever had long conversations about the intelligence relationship between, say, CIA and Mossad with any of these guys? And if so, what do they say about that?
Yeah, so it's a pretty close relationship, but it's not problem free. The CIA works very closely with a number of countries. There's the Five Eyes, which are kind of our closest allies, but also, you know, the Jordanians are good allies. Their intelligence community is really good, and they work with us on a lot of things, particularly in counterterrorism. With the Israelis, it's there's a lot of sharing that goes on, but it's also clear that the Israelis are more concerned about their own. They're very micro focused on their own problems, and they don't necessarily want to help us if it's not in their interest too. It's a bit. I want to be careful how I state that, but it's. I can tell you from the American side, there's sometimes frustrations that the Israelis will withhold information, or they'll, they're very very much seeing things through their own lens and not necessarily wanting to just to be good allies with us. Sometimes it's a little more complicated than just helping us. It's about more about kind of keeping their own system in good shape.
Thank you for watching the video, guys. If you haven't already subscribed, please smash that subscribe button and check out this clip's full podcast episode by clicking here or in the description below.